Oh, good morning, folks. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. This is the Podman Community Cabal meeting. We have a agenda up in HackMD, which I'll put into the meeting notes in a moment here. Today, we were going to be talking about Podman Cube to handle VMs too, but unfortunately, the person who was going to lead that discussion is not here. So I'm going to propose that, postpone that until the next time in March. Oh. And I let Pavlis in. Welcome, Pavlis. And then we are going to talk about Podman Kubernetes and image container volumes with Matt. And then finally, we're going to be talking about proposal to maintain podman-compose from Pavlis. And then any open discussion that we may have after that. So given all that, Matt, I'm going to hand it off to you and Dan, who's not quite here, but assuming you can take it.
I can at least try to get us started. So the ask here is originally coming from Dan, who basically wants a way to get an image into an existing container. Now, what I mean by this is we don't want to start a new container based on the image. We want to make the contents of the image available within an existing container as a volume. And Podman, we can already do this. We have actually two ways of doing this. We have a concept of image volumes, and we have a concept. They're both called image volumes. It's horribly confusing. One of them goes to the Podman volume command, one of them doesn't. Anyways, Podman, an abundance of ways to get images into containers. And this is very convenient for things like security scanning. However, the ask here is for a consistent way to do it that also works on Kubernetes. So we do not have, so we can basically have Kubernetes YAML that works in Podman and works in Kubernetes and allows us to mount an image in both. And I don't know if there's a good way to do that. It's certainly not any of the existing Kubernetes mount types. So you need a plugin or an operator or something to do it. I think we were counting on having Peter Hunt here, who is the cryo maintainer and would have a better idea of ways we could actually do this. And we don't have Dan and we don't have Peter. So we don't have a maintainer for Kubernetes and we don't have the person who originally made the feature request. We might actually want to postpone this one, Tom.
Okay, I was just trying to pull up Slack to see if I could ping either one of them, but yeah, why don't we postpone it at least till later? And why don't we go ahead and move on to our next topic then, which was a proposal to maintain podman-compose in Pavlis. Am I saying your name correctly?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, correctly.
Okay, great. Do you want to start up the talk for us?
Yeah. So basically, what's the purpose of this? So some time ago, I started using-compose due to some reasons. As podman-compose supports Podman itself better than, let's say, Docker Compose. In my case, it was I wanted to use gvisor for security purposes, and on Docker it doesn't work properly. On Podman it does, and it turns out that podman-compose is not maintained, even though there is a lot of community interest in terms of open PRs and so on. So basically, I had two possible actions: migrate off podman-compose and let's use something else entirely. And the second one is to actually help the project and help in maintaining it. So I chose the latter, and this is how the discussion started. I wrote a bunch of emails and so on, and now I'm here. So I don't know. Does anyone have any questions at this point, and I can answer this, or can I continue?
I have questions, but I think I'll hold till we get a little further.
Okay. So basically, we discussed with I think it was Tom Sweeney, about how this could proceed, and he raised a bunch of concerns about the project itself, its health. So I guess it makes sense for me to answer these, not only to Tom in private emails, but here. So one was that the project is basically, there was a concern that the project is basically dying. There's no community and so on. And this is why the focus of the Podman, let's say, project was put into Docker Compose. And it doesn't make sense to shift the focus back to podman-compose just for it to die again in a year. Which is, well, I agree with that concern. It is reasonable and so on. So I think that in terms of the health of the project, the community interest is much higher than it would seem, because during the last half year, on average, there was one pull request opened each week. And this is not bad by itself, but you need to keep in mind that in a project where it's obvious that it's not maintained, the maintainer is absent and doesn't reply on pull requests and so on, many potential contributors don't even create pull requests and don't contribute. And we don't see full community interest until the project is actually maintained and there's replies to issues and pull requests and so on. So myself, I'm quite positive in this area that the project can live basically by itself. Of course, we would see, but yeah. Further concern was that again about the focus. Basically, what happens if the focus is switched to podman-compose and it dies? So Podman project by itself is well, it is in worse position this way. So to this concern, I think best reply would be that I think it makes sense not to shift focus anywhere, keep it like it is, just leave the project live, and let's say not promote that podman-compose is the accepted way to do compose with Podman or something like that. And if it's not enough, I personally could agree not to promote podman-compose as some very great project, so that people would not be confused in case, well, let's say I lose interest and become absent in a year. So basically, this would reduce the chances for any downsides that maintaining the project would damage Podman, say, Podman project in any way. And on the other hand, there are benefits that it's possible to expose Podman specific functionality and podman-compose much better than in Docker Compose, because well, actually we cannot expose Podman specific functionality there. And for example, there could be Podman specific prefixes in the compose jam file, and so on. And for example, in my personal case, podman-compose already works with Podman better because gvisor works. And in Docker case, it doesn't properly. For example, I couldn't start Docker compose exec into the Docker container, which is using gvisor. So basically not useful at all. So yeah, I think that's it. About what I wanted to say. Maybe about the current status of the project maintainership. So the current maintainer has been absent for I think 7 months, and I wrote total. Well, not only me, but during the discussion with Tom, we CC'd the current maintainer we had on every email. So he got 10 emails during last 2 months. Well, 1.5 in January. And I'm not aware of any reply that we got from him. And in the project itself, he has been absent for 6 months and merged a couple of pull requests recently, about 2 weeks ago. And this broke all tests. And thank you. And no further activity for 2 weeks. So yeah, now I'm indeed finished. So what do you think?
So I opened up a issue to basically add other owners or other maintainers to that package. But I specifically said that if he didn't show up for another month, then we'd be able to do it. The problem I have is I'm not sure who to add. Do you think you'd be able to do this, or?
Was this question to me?
Would you want to be a maintainer of podman-compose?
Yes, me personally, and I would take responsibility for making releases and making sure that the code quality is good enough.
Yeah. The question I have is that a hostile act? I don't think it would have been hostile if he hadn't shown up, but at this point, if he's not responding to any emails or anything like that, right?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, and I sent a note, or I don't know if it was a GitHub issue or whatever, just after Pavlos and I first talked, and there's been zero response to that. And it was pretty pointed, are you there, kind of thing.
All right. Have we gone a full month since I opened up that issue?
Just a little more data. So there's 278 issues. So that little repo has almost more than half of what we have as a container runtime for unclosed issues. It hasn't had a release in 10 months. It's unfortunately in Fedora, but hasn't really iterated on versions in 10 months.
Okay, what we'll do is, if Pavlos, can you ping me 1 week from today? Because that'll be a full month since I opened that issue. At that point, I will add you as if he has not responded and has not commented on that, then I'll add you as a maintainer. At that point, you can add other maintainers to the project.
I swear at one time FOSS had rules for hostile takeovers. Like they had a general guidelines.
Yeah, this is not for FOSS though. This is for the GitHub. So
I meant for this kind of situation is what I meant, for projects that where the maintainer has gone MIA. I thought I swear that FOSS once released these are the steps we'd like to see people take. Anyways, so if that occurs, Dan, and we do that, we are somewhat pouring salt on our own wound.
Yeah.
In the sense that the branding around podman-compose has given us fits. So I'm wondering is if we feel that if we're saying, I guess publicly, we think podman-compose should continue to exist if we do this, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but perhaps one thing we might want to ask is for a rebranding on the name. So as part of it, change to some other name.
P-compose?
Well, I think that could be up to the new maintainer, frankly. But I wonder if that is more of in the spirit of an open source thing. And then secondly, it kind of helps both parties. So just to explain more broadly, when I say that it's like putting salt on our wounds, what I mean is that Dan and I and the team are frequently asked about supporting podman-compose because it's in Fedora, or somebody has decided to use it in combination with their RHEL subscription. And we really don't have anything to do with the project itself, other than at one point we gave it a GitHub repo under containers. That's been basically our affiliation with it. So I just would like us to consider that. I'm not suggesting we have to do that, but that would help both parties, in my mind, and would be a cleaner break. So we'd be technically more calling us a fork, I think, as opposed to a takeover.
I can comment on that from my perspective. So
sure, thank you.
I think that podman-compose just being under containers repository gives it, let's say, a canonical place where developers who want this kind of functionality can meet, and it helps the project attract contributions just by being under containers repository. Now, in terms of branding itself, I understand this concern. I wonder if it would be possible to explain that, okay, podman-compose is compose support for Podman, but Podman team doesn't maintain it. And the best user can do is to open an issue on podman-compose repository and wait for answer. Is it possible to consider this, or rename would be better from this regard? Because I basically consider that if we fork, then the developers who could contribute to podman-compose would basically, wouldn't have a clear place to gather, and wouldn't be incentivized to contribute. Let's say if the project is placed outside of containers, GitHub organization, then it's just random project.
We're not suggesting that we move it outside of containers.
Correct.
Okay.
We would be happy to continue to have it there. Maybe just looking for a new project name.
I think we'd be happy to keep the repository as well. We can just redirect to a new name. Podman moved from libpod previously, so I don't think just moving the repo name shouldn't be a big deal.
Okay.
The big confusion comes in is that we have a podman space compose command now, which will execute either Docker Compose or podman-compose, depending on what you have installed. And people are surprised when it isn't podman-compose. And that's where the naming,
Right.
basically we want to support. I don't think support's the correct term, but we want to allow people to use compose YAML files against Podman. That's our main goal. And the easier thing for us to support, since we have to support it, is Docker Compose, because that talks to our API server. Whereas if there's a bug in Podman Compose, none of the people that maintain Podman know Podman Compose. We don't work on that. So that's where the Podman Compose is talking to the client and Docker Compose is talking to the API server.
Okay.
So anyways, let's do that this week, and we'll rename the thing to be pcompose. And if that's okay with you, do you like that name?
Yeah, I can think about it.
Yeah.
But
All right.
Yeah. Why don't you think about it? And then we can use we can use that same issue. You could put a name in there.
Yeah.
Right before we do the swap.
Yeah.
I asked Tom a private question, but I'm going to put him on the spot now. This is a little bit also like maybe I shouldn't offer this, but we could blog about this change on Podman.io. We could provide you with an opportunity to blog about this on Podman.io to get the word out that essentially this is what's going on and this is the intent, and that you intend to begin reviewing and merging and all the normal upstream activities.
Yeah.
I think that for now it makes sense not to do that.
Okay.
Just silently, revive a project, and that's it. Because again, what happens if I lose interest in half a year? Let's say.
Yeah, well, that's why
I'm not planning.
I want you to get other maintainers on there so that there's more than, so we don't have a single point of failure that we have right now.
Yeah.
So if you can get a couple of other people who are actively looking to maintain it, then that would be the best possible outcome. And I would still allow, I can't pronounce his name, the person that originally created it, to continue to work on it as well as a maintainer.
Yeah.
The other bit was I gave a Koji link there. Does anyone know the person that was building it for Fedora? Gwyn, maybe? If I'm pronouncing that correctly.
It's Gwen
Yeah.
Ciesler. She's one of the main. She maintains a lot of packages.
Okay, so this is more like probably something fell out of maintainership and she ended up with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I remember because I was involved in that thread on the Fedora list.
Okay.
Right. So going forward, Dan and Pavlos will talk and we'll get this spun up and see where it goes, and perhaps we'll have some updates at the future Cabal meetings.
Yeah. The 26th is 1 month after I wrote that email. So, I mean, that issue.
Okay. Sounds good. Pavlos, thanks.
It's also clear that the maintainer had activity on the repo 2 weeks ago, and if he doesn't respond to the ping on GitHub or emails, then I don't know. There isn't much we can do other than ask him. And if he
I'm not looking to remove him as I'm not going to remove him as a maintainer. I'm just going to add other maintainers. So I think that's
I think
that's how we.
From my point of view, if the repository is under containers organization, then the end owner of the repository is containers organization, and the current maintainer is bound to its rules. And if he doesn't agree, then another maintainer can be chosen or added. in the end, let's say half a year of inactivity, I guess, is not well good enough level of maintainership, and well, containers organization then chooses another maintainer, and the current maintainer, if he wants to maintain the project at the current level of activity, he can do it in his own fork, let's say.
In any action we take, would we be keeping the current maintainer on the list of owners? So no permissions would be revoked at this time.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Very well.
Unless he started act hostile towards us, then we might have.
I frankly don't think you have to wait another week to just add him as a maintainer, but that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I concur. That could be done. I also think that we're kind of fuzzy about our rules for a situation like this, and as a takeaway, it might be something we want to add somewhere in the containers org itself. What happens when the maintainer disappears? Yeah, I don't think we have that very well specified, and it would be good to, list what happens. What are the steps that will be taken to remove them or not?
It's the first time it's happened, so
yeah.
I mean, probably a lot of dead projects on containers, but this is the first one where people are very interested in bringing it back to life.
So I'll ask the question: given the upstream situation here, should podman-compose not be carried forward to Fedora 40 right now? Martin Nilkesh?
Should not be.
We can control that.
I'm sorry, I
Whenever
didn't hear either.
Willis, you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to double check. Should not put podman-compose in Fedora 40, or should?
I was wondering if it should be not moved forward, but I think we would have needed to meet a date much earlier.
Yeah, I think the package might already be in the Fedora 40 composes.
Okay, sounds good.
A further question. So about this previous discussion about name and so on. Just let's say, imagine that the podman-compose takes the best possible path and is properly maintained and well reaches paired with Docker compose and so on. So question I want to ask, would we still consider the naming issues in that situation? Let's say if podman-compose was maintained in good quality all the time, so would we consider the naming still?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So the question is, I guess the question is the repo important, or is the package name inside of Fedora important? Yeah.
My 2 cents would be that we would, if it was properly maintained, we would have no justification for coming in and no cause to come in and ask for a name change as part of anything. That would be my 2 cents. I still, however, wouldn't like it. But I don't think any action. I wouldn't be advocating for action, and usually I'm the more aggressive of the bunch.
So we say
Maybe it may. Sorry.
Sorry,
maybe
go
it
ahead.
Makes sense. Maybe it makes sense to wait a half a year and see what happens. And if you are not satisfied, then rename the project.
Sounds good.
Just
I
add
think we
quickly
can
that renaming stuff can be problematic as far as the internet goes and links and stuff, especially if the project gets popular and gets blog articles pointing to it and whatnot. It could cause some issues.
So is that a vote of doing it now before it gets even more popular?
Yeah, I would say either do it early or don't do it at all. I have no problem with having really to say either way.
Yeah, there are definitely some well understood mechanisms within Fedora to do a package name change like that.
All right, I'm just looking at the clock and looking at the couple other topics that we have. So can we wrap this up somehow?
I
Perhaps.
think we're ready. Well, we decided we wait 1 week and then add him as an owner.
Yep.
And depending on the original maintainer's actions, we have sort of delayed the possibility of a name change.
Sounds good.
So how much time would I have? So half a year was suggestion.
Sure.
What would be you be comfortable with?
Let's see how it goes in 6 months.
How about before? Does anyone happen to have the Fedora 41 schedule?
It would be about October. Call it.
No, well, I know that's the release, but when's the proposal for name changes have to be in?
I don't know if they finalized it. Let me.
Okay.
I will check.
So we can dig that up, but that would be my personal opinion would be decide by then. And if you don't decide by then decide by the one in the spring. I mean, just as a natural guideline.
Great.
Sounds good.
Anything else on this? I've been trying to move it along. Trying. All right. Gonna look back to the original topic since Peter and Dan are here now. We were talking about Podman, Kubernetes, and image container volumes. Matt, do you want to kick off where we went?
Sure. I mean, Dan, this is really your show, but the general ask here is that we want a consistent way of having an image that gets mounted into a container, not gets created into a container, but is mounted into an existing container that works on both Podman and on Kubernetes. Does that sound accurate, Dan?
Yep.
And
Why do I love this?
What people are looking, well, we have multiple pull requests where multiple people talking about mechanisms for shipping data around to be used with containers. So the one I'm interested in is an AI model, which is usually a massive multi-gigabyte size data stream. And people want to run that in both OpenShift and with Podman. And Podman was saying, "I'll package it into a container image, and then you can push it to a registry and pull it, and then mount it as an image into a volume." There's another person there's a pull request up right now where someone's doing something very similar, where they want to take volumes from of an image and not have a container running, but take the volumes from an image and mount them into a Kubernetes YAML file. And really what I'm looking for is that Peter or others have ever heard of something like this in standard Kubernetes, because I don't want to have a Podman only way of doing this with a Kubernetes YAML file.
There's a project that did this, and I'm probably gonna fail to find it on the spot right now. But so basically like Kubernetes is a concept of the volume plugins. So like all the clouds can have their ways to inject a volume into container, but someone created a volume plugin for mounting an image into container. And I think it actually does use container storage. And so that project does exist. CSI driver, that's the phrase. Container storage interface driver. But that wiring that into Podman would be tricky. So you could have the same sort of interface, but it wouldn't work exactly the same because there wouldn't be this extra process that's actually like doing the volume management.
Is there a way in the Kubernetes YAML file to specify you want to use one of those?
And I used to be very active in the storage community. I haven't attended in like a year. The person who would be a good source to know would be Michelle Au at Google, because she's kind of the cat herder and would be aware of all the projects in Kubernetes storage. I have her contact information.
Yeah, can you send me the contact information? I just don't want to have something that, if possible, if there was a way that people tend to do this with Kubernetes YAML file, then we could write the similar YAML file for Podman and then have Podman interpret that mechanism rather than just creating something out of whole cloth.
Podman currently has support for some CSI drivers, like the ones that make sense, like host path and stuff like that. So it would look similar to that support, basically, but you would specify a different type.
So it'd be like an image path, and then I'd have the name of the image or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And if you wanted to base it off of this existing project, which I'm still trying to find, then they would have the API that you could emulate already. But it would not be. It's not like built into Kube itself, so like it wouldn't immediately translate into Kube. Like you'd have to load the CSI driver first and then use it, so it wouldn't be direct sort of translation.
So I mean, my goal would be that I could take that and launch it inside of OpenShift. Is that likely to happen?
Yeah, you'd have to deploy that CSI driver. We had talked about it a while ago, but we didn't really have a concrete use case for it, so we didn't do it. So I think it would be, I think we'd really need a compelling use case to like include it in OpenShift by default, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like operatorified, and then it would be easy to deploy on OpenShift. And then a user would just have to remember to do that before applying the YAML themselves.
All right. So I'll talk to Jeremy Eder about this and see if, because I think this is something that's going to be coming in the AI models that are being generated. Just because you don't really want to have your application and the AI model in the same container image, and so that's the use case I'm hearing a lot about. And as I said, this person opened up a pull request for a different use case, but it seems similar that they wanted to be able to ship something as an OCI image and use it as a volume.
Yeah, someone who's been on the cryo team, on my team, Sohan, has been looking at a similar use case, but also with crun Wasm, but like, using OCI artifact as like sort of the volume, like a volume that would allow for transporting it. So we're thinking about this a little bit too. Would you include me in that conversation with Jeremy? And we can try to find a unified sort of path.
Yeah, and artifact, it's one of those things. Is artifact the right thing? I don't know.
I feel like technically it would be. I mean, probably eventually you'd probably want a defined artifact type for this model. So then, the engines could interpret that type and know that it's not actually going to run anything. It's going to be injected in as a volume or something like that. But that would take negotiation in the OCI, which I don't think it's really been done yet.
Right. All right, Jerry. So if you can send me an email with the contact information, and then I'll follow up with Peter and Jeremy to talk.
Yeah, I'll keep looking for it. I'm not finding it right away, but I'll keep looking.
And you have Dan's contact info, Jerry? I put it in the chat if you don't.
Yeah, I do. I have Dan's contact info. Okay. I found it.
He has my contact information. And Peter, have you ever heard of anybody using volume from type construct?
Volume from no. What? No. I'll just,
So, you know, Docker invented the basically run one container and then you can say run a second container with the volumes from the first container. Feed into the second container.
well, because Kubernetes only thinks about pods, there's the volume which is separate from the container. So no, but like you can do it. It's just like it's not that like you don't put the container ID or like the pod name. You just like share the volume among different pods.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean that would seem to make more sense than. But I think if we had images, then we'd be able to satisfy the person who's looking for volumes from inside the quad. Yeah.
As a note, I think I did find the CSI driver, container image CSI driver, so I posted it in chat. And I don't know if this is actually where it's going to live long term. It looks like they're going through some renaming stuff, but maybe an acquisition happened or something like that. But this is, I think, the one we were looking at a while ago.
Yeah, at least it looks like it's a little bit active. So as of 2 weeks
So they're using quite an old version of Cryo. So who knows? But anyway.
Okay. We can move on to the next one, Tom.
And at the moment, that would be open discussions. Didn't have, no proposal for that. We had something from Vivek about Podman Cube to handle VMs too, Dan. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that now today or wait till he's here. He's on vacation. I think he forgot about his vacation time.
Yeah. So I think the basic idea right now we have KubeVirt, which is a basically taking a VM, putting it inside of a container image, and then all the tooling to run the QCOW2 inside of KubeVirt. And we've recently created a package called crun VM, which is a OCI runtime that will use the QEMU from right now it's defaulted to QEMU, but we'll run QEMU from the host and take the content of the image and run and basically look for a QCOW2 inside of the image and run the image. The use case we're looking for is basically like a quadlet where you'd have a machine boot up and you want to have a VM that's managed as a container. So, inside the quadlet, you can set its C groups, you can set its different flags, things like that, and then have it run. So we have support for that by specifying the OCI runtime inside of the quadlet. And what's been asked about was to basically, is there a way that we could use Kubernetes YAML file, which I believe has the mechanism to specify an OCI runtime inside of the YAML file and do something similar. And Peter, do you know if I'm talking truth or am I making things up?
So yeah, there is. Well, it's not So like KubeVirt provides an API for creating VMs, and that's like separate from the pod API. So it's like the KubeVirt API is like its own API, and then like it's integrated into Kubernetes through the KubeVirt CRD. So yeah, there is the KubeVirt API which you could sort of emulate. They did just semi-recently, last couple of months, reach 1.0, so it's a stable API now, which would be a good time to sort of adopt it.
We're actually, we're not talking about the KubeVirt API. We're talking, is there a mechanism right now to specify I want to use crun instead of
sorry. Yes, the runtime handler, runtime class mechanism. So Kubernetes, like there's an extra sort of type, a runtime class, and you define a runtime class, and then it basically just maps to a string name, and then in the CRI implementation, the Cryo, that it would have to be configured to have that name map to something. you could have a runtime class be created in Podman and then have that run, and then pods would use that runtime class.
Okay. So basically, the idea here would be this would be a dumbed down version of Kubernetes, in that you could just take a container image and use and specify the runtime class of crun QM, crun VM, and that would basically use QEMU to launch the QCOW2 that's inside of the image. That's all it would do. It will, and that QCOW2 then could be a Windows machine. It could be anything, any type of machine, but not taking advantage of any API.
So the runtime class, I posted the link in chat. You would want Podman to learn, to have the runtime class as an object it understands, and then the pod itself could. Or I guess you wouldn't even necessarily need to create the runtime class. You could just have it. There's a pod field runtime class name, and you could just have that mapped to whatever runtime you wanted to use.
Yeah, that's probably exactly what we want. And obviously, I don't want to compete against Kubernetes, but Kubernetes it currently doesn't run with Podman because we have to have some API server, which we don't have. So this would be a simpler mechanism for just running VMs underneath Podman, and then theoretically we could pass that on to Cryo and have it run the same workloads. That's good. I'll bring that back. As a mechanism.
Yeah, I know Vivek watches the videos for me, so he'll probably hop on there too. Right.
crun VM should be packaged for Fedora very soon. It should be in 40.
Right. We're running up to the end of our hour here, and just want to open up for any further discussions or questions that anybody might have.
Dan, you should have an email Michelle's contact information now. And
not hearing a whole lot.
If anyone's interested in SIG storage, that's the landing page for that group in chat.
Thanks for passing that along, Jerry. Right, last call for open questions. And I'll just put up a reminder that our next Cabal meeting is not February 20th. I don't have the exact date. It'll be the third Tuesday in March, which looks to be March 19th. I'll change that in the agenda. And then our next community meeting is in April, and that's on the first Tuesday of the month on April 2nd. We're looking for topics for both of those. We do have one possible topic for the next time around. Currently, we have a Quay.io namespace for containers, Podman, Builder, and Scopio. We're considering dropping that. So if you have any thoughts about that, please send those along to me. And again, one last chance for questions. Quiet punch.
Vikas, did you want to discuss init containers?
Yeah, hey, I had, I'm from Veritas Technologies, and the use case here I have is primarily around data protection as a backup appliances. The appliances we are building is based on RHEL 8.8 right now, and it runs Veritas proprietary net backup applications. There are 2 or 3 different use cases I have, and I don't think in the next 10 minutes I'm going to be able to finish that. So can we include, how do I include some topics or send you topics for next meeting?
Yep, I've put my email in the chat and in the messages, and then you can also just put them directly into the agenda here, which I've included in the chat. And Vikas,
okay.
Tom's Mini Red Hat in GitHub if you want to ping me that way as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I'll add that over there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, be happy to have more topics. Always looking for good topics.
Yeah.
That actually makes me think of going back to the data in a container image. Why do they want to do that? I mean, are they taking advantage of the overlay file system? Because the reason I thought of that is I just remembered in Kubernetes, some things that people do is they have an init container, Vikas reminded me, they have an init container that, will download from a Git repo or a tar file or something, expand the content into a shared volume between the init container and the application container. So that's how some people are obtaining data. I mean, you don't get the caching that you would get if it was downloaded as a container. But
so if I were to explain my use case over here, as I talked about backup application, net backup, and this is appliance, right? Physical appliance that customer deploys. It's not like connected to cloud as such, where you can just go to registry and download it. It runs in a very secured environment where the appliances don't have access to outside world.
I was going the other way. I wasn't saying that this would be a solution for you. I was saying that what you said reminded me of how people were using init containers to address the issue that Dan brought up.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, an init container. I mean, first of all, having a container doesn't add any value there, right? It's
exactly.
Yeah. So really what we want is we want to have a relationship between a container and an image that is both can live independently. So again, using the AI model, you have this huge model, gigabytes in size, and that can get updated periodically, and that could be used by multiple containers. So you might have 4, 5, 6 different apps that are all using the same AI model. And so the question is, how does that AI model get onto my Kubernetes cluster, or how does it get onto my edge device, or how do I get updates to my edge device? And there's no real container involved in this. It's just a huge data. And so that's, and I'm surprised that this doesn't come up more often. And just with the AI, it just screams for something like this.
Well, we have lots of customers doing that, but we just have a CSI driver and a distributed file system with good caching.
Right. Obviously, you can do this with file systems, but that's not cloud native, right? I mean, in a lot of cases, you're probably better off doing it as, not moving gigabytes of data around and using some kind of shared network storage to do it.
Right.
It just come up as like, okay. But if you thought about it as, hey, I have this really cool AI app I want you to try, and we could say, how do I get it? Well, go pull this, download this quadlet and run it on your system. And the quadlet then would take care of downloading all of the, as we say, download the quadlet, start the quadlet, and go to lunch, because when you get back, it'll be ready to run, because it's going to take an hour. And so it's how do you deal in that world, right?
And again, I think in the Kubernetes world, the way they deal with that is they put the model in GitHub and they have a init container that does that. That downloads.
So the init container goes out and basically either downloads it or figures out a way to set up an NFS mount, or in your case, an AFS, whatever, and gain access to that object. And provides it as a volume to everybody else.
Right. Exactly. But and with the init container approach, you don't need a CSI driver.
Right.
Well, it sounds like it'll be an interesting discussion for next time. Vivek, I've gone ahead and stubbed out a topic. Feel free to change my wording any way you see fit. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and thanks, folks, for coming here today.
Thanks.